High five. Great.
Very nice. High five.
Tell me a knock knock joke.
Knock, knock.
Come in.
Oh, and I did not have a knock, knock joke prepared. So I was kind of screwed if you didn't say that. That worked out really well for me. So Alan, you've done a bit of travelling.
A little bit.
I've done a bit of travelling. Let's talk travel.
We can talk travel.
I am fascinated by travel. I wouldn't say or consider myself a traveller, but I want to do a lot more of it. A lot more than I've already done. And the little travelling that I've done, I've got some good stories to tell. We might get into a couple of them.
All right.
I'm sure you've got some stories to tell.
I have many.
But I think in general, travel is one of the most incredible things that you can do as a human being. This world is incredibly large. They say it's a small world. I think that's more of a figure of speech.
Right.
If you consider the size of a human compared to the planet, it's a pretty big world.
I mean, if you're talking purely by scale, but you have to consider too. We now live in a world where we can fly across continents in a day.
It's true. It is true. And you can access anywhere relatively quickly depending on where it is. I mean, there's places in the Arctic that can take days to access, that kind of stuff. But you can be within a major city anywhere in the world within a day or whatever. There are so many parts of the world that are relatively unexplored. There are different cultures spread across different continents, different topographies. There's water-based cities. There's places in the jungle. There's places at high elevation. Places in snow, covered in snow 24/7. I am also of the common opinion that travel broadens the mind and cleanses the soul, as they say. Did you notice any of that going on when you travelled to China, for example?
Well, I traveled to China mostly to clear my head, and yeah, it was. I'll fall short of saying it was life-changing. I was only there for a few weeks, but it was mind-blowing. Like, I'm so glad I went. And
In what way was it mind-blowing?
Oh, dude, the juxtaposition between old and new, modern and traditional, the juxtaposition of wealth. Like, I went to Hong Kong, which per capita is, I think, the richest, I guess it's a city, state, or whatever, but, like, per capita, it's the richest in the world, the highest concentration of wealth. So the poor people there were driving BMWs. The rich people were driving McLarens and Bentleys and stuff. It was insane. And then there was like true poverty where, I mean, you didn't see it so much in Hong Kong, but in Beijing, there were homeless people missing limbs just begging while, swarms and swarms of people walked right by them without even so much as a glance.
Yeah.
Like, unreal. Something else I did in Beijing, when in Beijing, you have to check out some of the famous landmarks. So there was the Forbidden City, and there was Tiananmen Square.
How did you get permission to go there?
Aha! I see what you did. Funny enough, we didn't get permission to go to Tiananmen Square because.
But you did the Forbidden City.
But we did the Forbidden City because the president of China, Xi Jinping, I think I butchered his name. He happened to be making the announcement that Chinese people were allowed to have more than one kid in Tiananmen Square the same day we were there. So that's kind of cool. Definitely hit up the Great Wall of China for sure.
Was it great?
It was great. Yeah.
Nah, lives up to its name.
For sure. Did a little bit of trespassing on it. Because
you bad boy.
Yeah, I know. Well, here's the thing. Something we don't get in Canada is history. I mean, that's not to say there isn't history here. And this is, I think, one of the things I dislike about where we live is nothing is really ancient. Like ancient by our standards is something that was turn of the 20th century, right? Where I was in I was in Hungary and on a tour, the guy points to the mailbox and was like, that mailbox has been in service since the late 1700s. And I'm like, geez, like that's older than like that mailbox has seen more history than my entire country. You know what I mean? So, getting back to the Great Wall of China, Mao Zedong, the great leader great leader is Korean. Chairman Mao Zedong, when he was in power, wanted to really revitalize the wall, and so he initiated a massive undertaking to try and kind of restore this historical artifact to its former glory and splendor and all that jazz. And of course, that means resurfacing all the wall with new rocks, and they were probably manufactured
thousands of miles.
It's massive. But I mean, that's all well and good, but it's not the historical wall. It's not the same bricks that were made by hand using like rice and blood, sweat, and tears of these. I don't know if they were slaves or whatever, right? So along the wall, there was a spot that was closed down. You weren't allowed to enter because the sign said so in many languages. And just past that was the original wall that had been unfinished, untouched. I think they were kind of doing it segment by segment, and we just happened to be at the end. And so, of course, I'm like, dude, I want to touch the actual wall that these people built with their bare hands. Many, many men died building that wall. Like, I want to experience that. And it was crazy because there's like a veritable forest growing on the wall because like it's been in disarray and unused for so long, right? There were literal trees growing on the wall. And so I went and I experienced that, and there were sentry towers that were dilapidated, falling apart, really dangerous to probably be anywhere around, but I just wanted to experience that. And at one point I really, really, really had to pee. So I peed on a tree that happened to be on the wall.
You didn't.
So I peed on the Great Wall of China. And I'm sorry if I've offended everyone in China and abroad. But like logistically, there's not really a lot of places you can go. Right? And it's a long way up and a long way down, and I was having the time of my life. So I just kind of unleashed and peed on the wall. And I also later did a backflip on the wall. And so I'm maybe one of the only people in the world who's done a backflip and peed on the Great Wall of China.
Everyone knows if you're having a great time, you do a backflip and you piss on something.
Exactly. Mark your territory. I'd been there, done that. And it was the culmination of 2 life goals because I'd always wanted to go to Asia.
You'd always wanted to piss on the Great Wall of China?
Yeah. I want to mark my fucking territory. Can I go to jail for this?
Probably.
Just nature calls, man. I didn't do it disrespectfully. It was just kind of, shit, I really have to pee. And there's a tree growing on this here fancy wall. Seems as good a place as any, frankly.
I've never been to China, or anywhere in Asia for that matter, but one thing that's always fascinated me is all across the world, you have people living these completely different lives simultaneously. And that to me is incomprehensible. That right now, as we're doing this podcast, there is someone in Asia picking rice in a paddy field. Or there is some millionaire in a penthouse suite in New York snorting a line of cocaine. Like, there are so many different lives taking place right now at this moment. And they're so different. And like we mentioned before, different climates, different countries. It's just incredible.
Yeah. You don't have to go that far to see the diversity in lifestyle, right? Like, someone picking rice in a rice paddy somewhere might only be a few miles away from a guy in a penthouse snorting cocaine off a hooker's tits.
That's one of the things I love about travel, is that you can see those, get a glimpse into those people's lives. Just one little glimpse. And what's amazing to one person isn't amazing to another. So we live here in Calgary. You go an hour west of here and you're in the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah.
Arguably one of the most beautiful places on the planet. But we take it for granted.
Totally take it for granted.
And you're going to get people that live in Calgary that say, I love the mountains, I don't take it for granted. But you still do. It's just human nature.
You get used to looking out the window and seeing this splendor, and the air is clear. You know, we don't have fog, like haze of pollution. Like, we can see pretty clearly. You can see the mountains. I mean, I've lived here a lot of my life, and it's only been very recently that I actually started going out to the mountains and enjoying them. And so, like, the whole time that I've lived here otherwise, it's just been kind of like, the mountains are there, whatever. You know, but yeah, it's easy to take for granted where you live. If you lived in Thailand, for example, if you were like fairly well-to-do, you know, middle class, upper class, whatever in Thailand, which is like a sweet destination for a lot of people, certainly your age, my age, but like if you live in Thailand, maybe you take that for granted.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I just feel really sorry for the people that don't have a chance to travel. I mean, we haven't travelled all that much. It's not like we're going somewhere every couple of months, but there are some people that will never get the chance. And there are also some people that do have the chance but choose not to. And that's one of the things that blows my mind.
Because I'm that guy.
Yeah, well, it's very common, especially in countries like the UK. I mean, I say countries like the UK, it's really all I've known, but I know so many people that have never even left the UK. I mean, look how close you are to the rest of Europe.
Yeah, you can can't you like take trains, planes, and automobiles to France?
Absolutely, you can.
Like,
but some people will never do it because they're happy with what they've got, or they don't feel like they need to. And speaking of not feeling like you need to, I would say that the internet and Google Earth has ruined me. I've travelled a little bit. I've been to maybe, 10 countries in my life. But I would say that in my most recent trip, a lot of it was ruined because I spent a lot of time looking at the places on Google Earth before I went. So when I went to Paris, for example, I felt like I had been there already. Right. I was looking around going, I've seen that. Oh, I know how to get to the hotel from here because I've zoomed around on Google Earth. So part of me thinks that, or feels like I don't want to do that anymore and just go somewhere and be surprised next time.
Right. Sometimes it's fun to go retroactively onto Google Earth after you've been to a place. Like I did that pretty recently with Hong Kong, just like, where is my hotel in relation to the racetrack? And then, oh yeah, I remember going down this street all the time and hopping this train and crossing this body of water to go to the shopping center or whatever. But I'm the opposite. I think I like to kind of get my bearings first because I have zero sense of direction, and Google Earth is kind of my friend.
Yeah.
I want to know where my hotel is and how to get back and find various landmarks, and Google Earth makes that super easy.
Where would you go if you could go anywhere in the world right now?
I have a long, long list.
What's number one? What's number two?
Well, Scotland, of course.
well, obviously.
And that'll end up being the first place I go next.
Yeah, because you have to.
Because
he's been forced to.
I'm being forced to. For those of you who don't know, Chris is getting married in Scotland.
You know, it's funny, just on the subject of not appreciating what you've got, because I often get asked why I left Scotland. Because people have visited for a couple of weeks and have spent a lot of time in the Highlands or Edinburgh, which are beautiful places, and they'll say to me, why on earth would you leave that beautiful country? And it's just funny. It's the perspective of the person.
Yeah.
I've seen it my whole life, just like we've seen the mountains now for years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for people to imagine that don't live there why you wouldn't want to live there anymore.
Yeah, and like nobody's saying you have to move there, but it's like we touched on earlier, there's deserts which are, far removed from Scotland. Wouldn't you want to see a desert? And there's different kinds of deserts. Not that a desert necessarily is going to be like the optimal holiday destination, right? But like a lot of people go to Arizona or Las Vegas, which is in the middle of a desert. There's Dubai on the other side of well, I mean, not quite the other side of the world from Las Vegas, but they're both in the desert, and they're both really. I've never been to either, but would like to.
Yeah, Vegas is pretty cool. You know, you're talking about the kind of commonly known style of desert, but the definition of desert is something like a place devoid of life and
devoid
lack
of
of
water.
Yeah, okay.
Plenty of life, but
Plenty of life.
highly specialized forms. Lots of spiders. Ugh.
Oh, let's not go there.
Nah.
We're going to be itching for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah. Where would you go if you could go somewhere right now? Here's a plane ticket to anywhere.
Yeah, you know, I think I'm going to surprise you. Because although I've really enjoyed my time travelling so far, I'm a bit of a princess. I'm the fussiest eater you've ever met. Mm-hmm. So that's a real problem for me. It's funny when you talk about it now, but see when you go somewhere and you're starving and all you can eat is cheese and croissants and frog's legs, it's not a good situation
All
to
of
be
which
in.
I'm down with.
Exactly. So that's part of the travel experience for some people, is getting to taste different foods, completely different palates made from different ingredients, and in a lot of cases super fresh stuff that you couldn't even get here because in order for them to transport it, it'd be a waste of time. Mm-hmm. It'd be rotted by the time it got here.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a nightmare because I'm super fussy. I don't really like trying new foods. I like trying new things in terms of experiences, but foods, forget it.
Right.
Even drinks, I'm pretty cautious about. So that's difficult for me. And also the language barrier. You speak a couple of languages, maybe not super fluently, but you enjoy learning them and trying to speak them to the native speakers.
Yeah.
That for me is an absolute no-no as well. Like, I don't refuse to speak another language. I've just got this thing in my mind where I don't want to speak it unless I can speak it well.
Right.
I don't want to make make a fool of myself, I should say. So when I went to France, I knew a couple of sentences in French, but I would never say any of them.
That might be a bad example because the French are notorious for...
No, you know, I didn't find that they were.
Maybe it's just French Canadians.
Yeah, I went to Paris and people said to me the French are really rude, or they don't like when you don't speak French. I didn't find that at all.
I think it comes down to how you... If you're like an entitled...
Right, if I'm a big fat American and wear a Trump hat, wear my
Sorry,
fanny pack.
any American fans, but it's true. You guys are obnoxious overseas.
It's well known. This is true. So, yeah, I found them to be super friendly and really accommodating. But even still, that was an issue for me. I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. I didn't want to make them speak a different language in their own country.
Right.
So, the way I'm kind of thinking about traveling now is that I almost don't really want to go anywhere that doesn't speak English. And that's so selfish. I mean, I'm the one that chooses where I travel, so it's not really that selfish. But I think that if I had to choose anywhere in the world, it would probably be somewhere like the southern states of the US. I've got this kind of mini dream to go to the southern states and just spend time in a bar, like a random bar, and meet the locals. And you know that in that little tiny town in the middle in America, buttfuck nowhere as you guys call it, and maybe that's a bit narcissistic, but if you think about it, in this small town in America, the kind of conversations that you can have are going to be so unique. Because firstly, you both speak the same language, but I've come from such a different background than these people. And like I said, they will never have met someone from Scotland, likely, depending on how small the town is. And the kind of conversations that you could have with them would be super interesting. And you just know that because of that southern hospitality, you're going to be invited back for a backyard barbecue. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why, but that's been my dream for a long time. And I think that I'm probably going to make it happen in the next few years. I mean, we only live just a short flight away, so I think that could be our next, maybe after the honeymoon. After the trip to Hawaii, that'll be the first one on my list.
Right.
What about you? Where would your place be?
Actually, it's on my bucket list to do that exact trip. I would really like to drive, though. I think that'd be interesting to kind of drive
from
down.
here.
Maybe not from here.
That's the problem with Calgary, is that it's situated in such a way that there's so much nothingness around it that you have to drive for about 3 days to actually get to anything worthwhile.
Pretty much like those flyover states you'd be driving through.
Wyoming.
Yeah.
What on
Well,
earth is
the
there?
topography though. So I've done the trip. Like I lived in the southern U.S. for a little while, right? And I drove from Oklahoma to Colorado, and just seeing the topography, driving through quote unquote nothing, was super fascinating. Watching the Rocky Mountains turn red
I've heard that.
and then
amazing.
turn rocky, like coming out of basically nowhere, like from the plains, and then just yeah. So topographically, I would find that really interesting, which is why I would want to drive. Mm-hmm. But unlike you, I love to travel for the food, and I was looking forward to eating all the street meat in China and like getting my hands on weird stuff.
Forget it. Forget it. Nah. Nobody wants to munch on a scorpion.
I do. Like God knows what the hell I ate in Beijing because nothing was in English and nobody spoke any Cantonese, which is, like I know enough Cantonese to order most of my food in Cantonese, but in Beijing they speak Mandarin. So, yeah.
So, I'd heard that in China, food is actually more about the texture than the flavour. Is that something that you've heard?
I don't know that that's necessarily a property or an attribute they're aiming for, but
No, I'd heard that they're less concerned about the flavour of something if it has an interesting texture.
well, I can tell you, I can verify that a lot of that food has pretty interesting texture. So if you're thrown off by texture, you're not gonna like a lot of that food. But there are a few things in Chinese cuisine that I just don't like, such as eggplant. Doesn't matter how you prepare it, I don't like it.
Yeah, you don't ever meet anyone that says they love a good eggplant, do you?
Not unless it's an emoji, and they're a she's yeah shapoopy.
Hand eggplant, squirt, squirt.
Peach.
Oh God. Eggplant, peach, peach.
Mom, if you're listening,
She's not going to know what you're talking about. It's
Nope.
fine. It's code.
so yeah, texture might play a role in that. Certainly there's a lot more diversity in the texture. Like even if you go to a Chinese restaurant here for dim sum, you're gonna find a lot of chewy and a lot of rubbery. And as long as you're not thrown off by texture, but I really like the flavor.
Another part of it might be that they don't waste as much as we do. I think that a lot of the foods that we don't consume or parts of the food go to other things like dog or animal food or chicken nuggets.
Mm-hmm. Like chicken feet, for example, is a
Exactly.
dim sum dish.
That's right.
And that, you want to talk about texture. Ugh.
Yeah, you know the TV show Border Patrol? Mm-hmm. And there's a series of them. There's Border Patrol Australia, Border Patrol Canada. One thing that Chinese people seem to be getting busted for a lot is having duck feet as a snack. Because I don't know if it's considered a meat or if it's an organic product that isn't allowed to be brought across the border without being declared. But they eat duck feet as a snack, which I find incredible. I don't think I would ever eat that.
Yeah, I don't know. Have to be cleaned pretty well.
I don't know. Sometimes there's just no need, though. Is there?
But I feel the same way about organ meats too.
Yeah, liver.
And yeah, I don't know, man. I'll take a steak over some sweetbreads. It's not for me, And maybe I'm a boring culinary traveler or whatever, but I kind of draw a hard line at organ meats.
Yeah. So that covers food.
Well, does it?
You didn't mention why, another major reason why you want to go to the southern states.
That's right.
You've told me before.
I've told you before, and I will tell you, fair listeners, on Netflix, there's this really great program called Mind of a Chef, and I think in the second half of the first season, or maybe it's the second season, I don't remember, but basically, it features Southern cuisine, like Southern U.S. cuisine, and my God, dude, I feel like I got fat just watching it, and it made me just really, really, really want to hit the road. And and there's what I didn't appreciate until I saw the show is just how much diversity there is, just even within the different states. Like if you go to New Orleans, they've got their po' boys, and they've got their own Creole and Cajun cuisine. Go to Louisiana, maybe it's a little bit of the same, but like the more, like from Louisiana, you go up to, I don't know, Kentucky or whatever, right? Like you've got your staples, corn and beef and pork and whatnot, but the way that they prepare it all, and like, yeah, it just looks really good, really, really delicious. And the other thing that I know you won't appreciate, but I sure do, Kentucky, home to bourbon, which is the American national beverage, or national spirit, or whatever.
Is it?
It is. And
What's the American national beer?
I don't know that they have one.
It's got to be if there's a spirit.
I don't know. We can Google that. But yeah, bourbon is the national spirit for sure. And it is made right there in Kentucky. Kentucky has a ton of different distilleries. I would love to do a distillery tour.
Boys trip!
That's what this podcast is pretty much shaping up to be, isn't it? We have different reasons to go to the same place.
Yeah.
We should just, do that. Okay, so we've established where we would maybe like to go. Can I tell you where I really don't want to go?
Absolutely.
Ooh, I bet you can guess.
Could I?
Well, okay. Here's a hint. The flora and the fauna can and will try and kill you.
Okay. I'm going to guess it's somewhere in the Oceania region.
You would be correct, sir.
I have the same feelings. So in case you're wondering, we're talking about Australia. Australia is a place that many, many people go, especially from the English-speaking Western countries. Huge tourist destination. And it's usually a place that people go for more than just a week's vacation.
Yeah.
They usually do their gap year there, or they take a month out or whatever, some sabbatical. But for me, I've just never been all that interested in going to Australia. And one of the reasons is because I'm absolutely terrified of spiders.
Yeah, they got spiders the size of goddamn house cats.
Yeah, jellyfish, scorpions, sharks,
Yeah.
killer kangaroos.
Yeah, like you can't run away from the spiders into the ocean because then everything in the ocean is going to try and kill you.
They've just got you cornered.
Like even platypus. Did you know this? Platypus? You have poison, the males. They can jab you with a little spike and actually poison you. They're venomous.
Not interested.
Right? And then there's the people.
Yeah.
Chris.
I don't know what's worse, the spiders or the people.
Like, when I was in Asia, a lot of the white people that were there were Australians, and man, they're like the Americans of the
The East.
The East. No offense to all parties, but sometimes the bad apple spoils the bunch. Just loud and obnoxious, and often drunk, and often entitled. I don't know. Maybe I'm just bitter because they're all better looking than me and had sweet tans.
That could be part of it.
Yeah, it's probably entirely the reason. But screw you, Australia.
But we love you.
But we still love you.
But we love you.
And I probably would still go. It's not high up on my destination list, though. Like it's like Hawaii, right? If someone offered me plane tickets, I'll probably go, but Hawaii would never make my
That is interesting, because Hawaii is actually, after that trip to the southern states, is next on my list.
Oh, really?
And that's where I absolutely intend on going for the honeymoon.
Well, I guess it's like Asia light for you.
Yeah, well, like we mentioned earlier, it's an English-speaking place.
Yeah.
It's going to have a heavy American influence, so I can be sure that I'm going to get a lot of the home comforts that I've become accustomed to.
Do you like Spam? Because they really like Spam.
I don't mind it.
Yeah,
But,
Spam's good.
I'm going to get this beautiful, breathtaking scenery around me, and it's just going to be stunning. I don't see why you wouldn't want to go to Hawaii, other than the fact that you're flying across water for hours, and if you're going to crash, you're going to die.
Yeah, but that's true of anything. You could
I'm
fly to
already
Vancouver
dreading it.
and crash and die.
Yeah, I mentioned being a princess earlier. I don't like the food. I don't like speaking other languages. I hate when it's too hot. I hate when it's too cold. And I'm terrified of flying.
Do you know how to say...
I might as well just stay here.
Do you know how to say Merry Christmas in Hawaiian? Malakaliki maka is the thing to say. We were driving to work the other day and listening to Christmas music, and all of a sudden the song comes on, and I'm like, holy shit, is that Seth MacFarlane? And sure enough, girl, it was Seth MacFarlane on the radio singing a Christmas song. I think Bing Crosby did it originally. Super funny. Anyway, that is how you say Merry Christmas in Hawaiian.
You want to know one thing that I noticed on my travels that I had never even considered before?
Sure.
Race.
Uh-oh.
So it had been a dream of mine since a young kid to visit America. Finally did it for the first time straight out of university. And I went to Chicago of all places. And one thing that blew my mind was the number of black people there were in Chicago. I shouldn't have been surprised. It's known for having quite a high percentage of black people, but coming from such a white country, like 99 point whatever percent white, I was blown away. I just couldn't believe... I had never been around so many people of a different race. Is that a race?
I mean, I don't think races actually exist.
Right.
If you want to get scientific about it, but you've never been around such diversity of ethnicities, perhaps? Because
maybe.
It's true.
I don't know if it was all that diverse. It was basically white and black, but yeah, I just had never... I mean, growing up in Scotland, we knew the one black family in the small town that I was from. So to go to a city of like 55% black that already has 2 point whatever million people, that is a heck of a lot of people of a different skin colour to see for the first time. I was just fascinated by it. It was everywhere you looked. And just like white people are kind of like sheep and all do the same thing and say the same things and dress the same way, that's what it was like seeing a huge community of black people. They were all speaking the same way and wearing the same clothes. It's mind-blowing. So I've actually got a funny story as it relates to this. So I went with a friend of mine, also super pasty white, whiter than me in fact, and we had set up an apartment to stay at for the time that we were there, which was 3 months. Pretty decent chunk of time to spend in America for the first time. So we had set up this accommodation and we got there and we arrived, stayed in a hotel for a couple of days, and then after that we were set to move on to stay in this kind of 2-bedroom apartment in a place called Hyde Park, I think. We didn't know anything about the area. I had looked it up on Google Earth, didn't look too bad. But we got on the train downtown Chicago and just a mixture of black and white people. And then as we got further away from downtown, we were going south.
Yeah.
White people were getting off the train at each stop, to the point where we were the only 2 white people left in the train and the carriage was packed. And it was very strange being absolutely surrounded by black people when you're white. And now I feel like I understand a little bit what it's like to be surrounded by white people as a black man, or white people as some Asian.
Or a white person in China.
Well, exactly. And I was going to ask you if that same thing happened to you.
Yeah.
So the area got really, really sketchy. And I didn't know this, but the south side of Chicago is known for its crime and violence and gangs. So we looked outside and we saw prostitutes on the street, people selling drugs. And I remember saying to my friend, I hope that our stop isn't anytime soon. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. We've still got a while to go yet. And we were getting off at a stop called Garfield Station. So pretty much as soon as I said that, the little notification came out and it said, next stop, Garfield Station. So I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because both of us had giant suitcases and we are the whitest guys you've ever seen. So we got off the train at Garfield Station. I was literally shaking because nothing to do with the fact that the people are black. It was just a super, super sketchy neighbourhood that we were in. So standing on the platform, and I thought, okay, well, what we're going to do? Because I do not want to go down onto that street with these suitcases. So there was a lineup of people on each side of the train tracks, waiting for the trains, obviously, going in opposite directions. And there was a payphone. So I went up to the payphone and thought, okay, well, let's call a taxi then. And neither of us had phones because we weren't from America. So I looked around in the payphone box or booth. There was no phone book. There were no numbers for taxis. And I thought, oh, well, what are we going to do then? And my friend said, well, why don't we ask someone? So went up to a random girl, chose a girl, thought I was safer that way, and said, excuse me. And she looked at me and then put her head down. And I thought, oh, maybe she didn't hear me. I said, excuse me. And she just looked at me again and shook her head as if to say, sorry, I can't help you. I thought, well, I don't look homeless or anything. Why would she be ignoring me like this? So I walked back to the phone booth and I'm thinking, what the hell are we going to do here? Then the next train after pulls up and the conductor rolls down his window and he said, hey, you guys lost? And we're like, no, thanks. And he's like, okay, just looking out for you guys. And then drove away. And that's when I knew that we were definitely in trouble.
Yep.
So we went back to the phone box and we're trying to figure out what the hell we were going to do. And then that girl that I tried to speak to minutes before just walked up to me, didn't say anything, and handed me a cell phone. And it was ringing a number. So I put it to my ear and it was some old man on the phone, or it sounded like an old man at least. And I was trying to speak to him and ask him, I assumed that it was a taxi. I was trying to ask for a taxi and he could not understand what I was trying to say.
Because of the accent?
Because of the accent. So I just eventually ended up speaking in a completely American accent.
Hello!
Yeah. Hi there, taxi please. And he finally understood what I was saying. So we waited about 5 minutes and we went downstairs and this truck pulls up. It's like I think it was a Ford Explorer. So a kind of dated SUV. And then this old man looks at us and just does that. You can't see what I'm doing right now, but it's the I am laughing so hard body motion. And he was laughing his head off. And then he opens the door and he's like, what the fuck are you two doing here? And he's like, get in. So we got in this car and he was laughing again. And he's like, you shouldn't be here. And we're like, well, what do you mean? He's like, people don't take kindly to your type around here. And he's like, if I can give you any advice, it's to stay off the streets and don't ever go anywhere like alone. And the story gets better after that because we got to our apartment, or what we thought was our apartment, and there was no answer. So we gave them a phone, nothing, no answer again. And I thought, wait a minute here, if they don't answer and this cab goes away, we're stuck in the middle of the south side of Chicago with two white boys with suitcases.
Yeah.
So I asked the taxi driver if he wouldn't mind staying for a couple of minutes. I gave him whatever, $10 or whatever. So we eventually got through to the person that was supposed to be renting us this apartment. And she said, oh yeah, I'm not there right now, but if you go up a couple of blocks around the corner, my friend will meet you and he'll give you the key. And we're like, nah, no chance. This is it, because we got the apartment through Craigslist.
Right.
And it all kind of became clear right in that moment that we were completely being scammed.
Yeah.
And we probably would have just got robbed and beat up or worse if we had gone around that corner. So from that point on, we were homeless. Like, we did not have a place to stay. And we had so little money because we had been promised jobs, which ended up falling through, that we couldn't afford to pay for anywhere else really without working. But just goes to show you how different places have different cultures and how some people are welcome and some people aren't. So I think you've got a similar experience, maybe not similar, but similar feeling of being unwelcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what you saw was the the tourist track side of Chicago, right? And I think everywhere you go has that. Like even Thailand, which we mentioned earlier, being like a really popular tourist destination for white people from Canada and the US. Like, we've got a friend who grew up in Thailand for a bit, and he'll tell you if you go a little bit further down the streets away from the touristy stuff, you'll see the real Thailand and the real Bangkok and what that's all about, and its seedy underbelly. Yeah. I mean, my story wasn't nearly as life-threatening, but when I was in Beijing, I just felt like we were staying in this hostel. We got scammed by the cab driver who didn't put on, like, from the airport to our hostel. He didn't speak a word of English, but he knew that we didn't speak any Mandarin, so he didn't turn on the little meter and then told us when we arrived there how much we owed him, which was about 4 times what it should have cost. Fortunately, the exchange rate Canadian to Chinese yen wasn't too bad, so we were like, whatever, it was an extra $20 or whatever. But yeah, just being the only, I went with 2 other whiteys, and one of them's ginger and the other guy was like a former bouncer, so we just looked like a weird ragtag group of white people. And nobody spoke English. Nobody really even spoke Cantonese, which I thought I could kind of at least get a little bit by on, but nope. So getting around sucked, and we didn't have Google Maps or anything like that at our disposal. Our hostel, we stayed at a hostel, which was in an alley in the middle of like one of the world's most populated cities. And it was an experience.
But I think all of this really helps build character, as they say, and you'll have these stories to tell forever. And whenever you hear of something from or about Beijing, or I hear about Chicago, you've got flashbacks and you've got the lowdown on what it's like to actually live there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beauties of travel, is that it opens your mind to these things.
Mm-hmm. Opens your mind, and maybe sometimes your arteries when you get shanked in an alley because you answered a Craigslist ad. All right, so the takeaway here, don't answer Craigslist ads.
Don't answer Craigslist ads. Sit in your bedroom eating Cheetos on Google Earth, and you can go anywhere.
Yeah, you can
safely.
experience it all.
Safely.
Although you won't get the smell.
Is that a thing for you?
Oh, dude. I remember one of the first times. Was it the first time I went to Mexico? Yeah, it was. We actually crossed the border on foot from San Diego into Mexico. And, like, there was a revolving gate to get in.
And then, I've heard this.
And then there's, like, a painted line, like, welcome to Tijuana. And the minute you cross that, oh, wow, the air smells different.
Oh.
Like, I swear, it's like someone used their nose to decide where to draw that border. It was, yeah. And Tijuana's another one of those, like, people go to Cancun or, you know, Puerto Vallarta.
Right.
And that's like Mexico light, you know.
Yes.
It's where all the tourists go and everyone's like, cerveza, por favor. But, like, the real Mexico, where the real Mexicans live, it's not 5-star resorts.
Yeah.
It's real life, you know, for them. And real life means street markets and, you know, kids playing and all that shit. Stray dogs with, like, a missing
rabies
testicle for some reason. Things I saw in Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the real world, and it's not glamorous. It's just, it's like here, right? We are proud of Calgary, and we think Calgary's lovely. If you were to come here without knowing anything about Calgary and you wandered down the wrong street, I mean, maybe you're not going to get shanked or whatever. You're not going to come across a stray dog with rabies, but what are you going to see? Like, nothing, right? Some houses, maybe a tree. Well, lots of trees. But
yeah,
it's like there are certain places you go because there are reasons to go there. And once you kind of leave that, you kind of enter this realm where people who reside there live and work every day. And
I think
to them, it's not a trip. It's just their reality.
Another example of that is Rio.
Yeah.
I think that the Olympics brought that to light, that even though you're seeing these picturesque scenes and postcard-worthy images, the reality is that there's some of the worst poverty in a first world country that you can get. Is it first world country? Probably.
No.
It's not?
Oh, God, no. Okay. So
It's one of these weird ones.
when we think of first world, we think of like the wealthy sort of countries, right? But
Yeah.
first world, second world, third world actually dates back to World War II, and it all comes down to who were primary fighters in the war, secondary fighters in the war, tertiary fighters in the war.
It does?
Yeah.
So, by that standard, they would be third world because they weren't involved in the war.
Right. Unless they were like somehow de facto because of like Portugal. So maybe they're but I don't know how that works.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So, is that still the standard today? Like, is there not a different standard?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of culturally it's shifted into more like, hey, is your GDP high? Then you're first world.
Right.
And do you have an appalling record for human rights violations? You're probably third world. And in a lot of cases, those traits just kind of correlated because, like, if you were the victor in the war,
Right.
the spoils went to you, and I guess, I don't know. I could be talking out my ass. I haven't researched this. I'm just going by what I'm pretty sure I know. So someone can fact check me and tell me I'm an idiot, but
It makes a lot of sense, though.
yeah.
Well, Alan, it's getting late. It's a school night. We've been yapping probably a bit too much about travel.
Perhaps.
We've covered race. We've covered poverty. We've covered spiders. What recommendation do you have for us this week?
It's a weird segue, but we also talked about Kentucky and distillery tours earlier, and you know me, I am a fan of the distilled spirit. Well, one of my favorite bourbons happens to be Woodford Reserve, and that is my recommendation for this week. If you like bourbon or scotch or whiskey of any kind, and you've never tried this, it's a good one to do. It's top shelf. It's a little pricey, but I think it's well worth it. It's got just a really nice balanced palate, oaky flavor. It's not too sweet, not too sour, just kind of right in the middle where I like it. So
for the bourbon layman, what's the difference between this and, say, Jack Daniels?
Well, price point. First of all, Jack Daniels, if you're talking about just standard run-of-the-mill Jack, it's much cheaper. It's probably better for mixing, although there are certain blends of Jack that are really, really good. But for my money, it'll always be on Woodford Reserve if I have to pick the two. I mean, functionally, Jack Daniels and Woodford Reserve are both whiskeys. Really, there's Jack Daniels isn't a bourbon because it's not from Kentucky, and there's legal designations there that kind of, I don't know, it's like Scotch has to be produced in Scotland, even though in Ireland they produce whiskey using the same ingredients and the same processes a lot of the time, right? But it's just how it gets legally defined. Semantics. Yeah, but Woodford Reserve.
How much can you pick up a bottle for, did you say?
Well, that depends where you are in the world, where you're listening. But in Calgary, it is, if you can find it on sale for less than $40, good for you. Because usually it's between 45 and 55 for a standard bottle size.
There you go.
Yeah. Do you have a recommendation this week?
So we've been talking travel, and one of the things that people often take with them on their travels is a camera. And I think that there's this perception that the bigger the camera, the better it must be. I've seen people carry these super heavy cameras that don't fit in their bags, strapped around their neck, looking like tourists.
Yeah.
And they have terrible battery life. And I would recommend what's called a compact DSLR. So it can have all of the performance and take incredible images just like the big cameras, but at a fraction of the weight and size.
So you don't look as much like a tourist when you're being a tourist.
Yeah. And just logistically speaking, it's way more practical. You can carry a bunch of lenses around with you, as well as the camera body, and you can take a completely different range of shots from far out, from up close, really professional level photographs, but at a tiny size.
Right.
So I have one myself. I've got a few different lenses. There are different manufacturers that have different lens systems, but I've got a Sony one myself. So it operates on the E-mount system, which means that I can use any Sony E-mount lens on my camera. There are hundreds out there, and I can buy one, stick it on, and use it for different purposes. So if I want to zoom in on something, I would buy a zoom lens. If I want to take portraits, I'd buy a different kind of lens for that. And you can get cheap lenses, you can get expensive lenses, you can get multi-purpose lenses, but I would really, really recommend a compact DSLR because you get all of the benefits of those huge cameras, but at a fraction of the size and weight, and sometimes a fraction of the price.
Right. And I can vouch because I've seen your shots with that camera and they look fantastic.
Yeah, and that camera that I've got isn't even a high-end camera. I mean, you could probably pick it up now for, I don't know, 500 Canadian dollars. But obviously you get a wide range of models. The one that I'm looking at getting eventually is probably closer to 2,000, but you don't need to do that if you're not seriously into photography. I'm not either, but I'd like to be one day. So do yourself a favour and drop those big heavy cameras. They're unnecessary.
And you look like a freaking
You look
tourist.
like a moron.
You
Don't
look
do
like
it.
a knob.
Just don't do it.
Don't. It's like wearing a fanny pack. Just
There's no need.
no.
There are other options out there.